Hello and welcome back to one of the strangest parts of YouTube where you get to stare at my manicure and watch as I stumble my way through making a glitter cup. Today's video unfortunately is not K-pop related, but I think it'll be fun nonetheless. It's a set of cups that are for my niece and my nephew. One is a Pokémon themed with Litten, and the other one is a sort of iridescent unicorn theme. So to start off with, I had this 12-ounce tumbler that I got just from Amazon. Probably paid too much for it, but I found cheaper options since I made this. So I printed out, so I cut these names out of vinyl using my Cricut cutter. I think it's a Cricut Air 2. And I just used two colors to sort of give it a more graphical edge. And I decided to do the name first just because I felt that one was a little bit harder for me to do, so I wanted to do it first. So just trying to make sure that gets flattened down pretty well. The nice thing about these matte vinyls like this though is that even when you put the epoxy over it, a lot of times imperfections in that vinyl will disappear. That's not the case for foiled vinyls, but you can't have all of it. So this Litten face, I used Adobe Illustrator and traced an image off of the internet, or did an image trace. And I was able to get a sort of basic image from that, and I had to do some editing to it to get it to look right, change some colors around just to make sure that I was only using 3 colors for this particular image. And so right afterwards, I was just making sure that it was fairly straight, or at least as straight as I could get it. And right now we're going to be doing the epoxy. This is a matte cup that I bought, a matte black cup. And I will tell you, there are some issues with these matte cups in general. Unfortunately, they show every little imperfection. If you have a glitter cup, for example, it's not going to show every little problem. Unfortunately, these just straight colored cups, they will. But I think I made it work. I think it ended up looking pretty good. There were a few issues that required me to actually put a second layer of epoxy on this particular cup. The raised lettering of his name just was a little bit too bumpy for my taste, so I did do a second layer of epoxy after this layer. Moving on to the second cup, this was the unicorn cup for my niece, and I just showed the Litten cup real quick, but this cup was a little bit more difficult than the last. I first started off by buffing the surface slightly with some fine grit sandpaper just to get some of that shininess off, and so that stuff would actually stick to it. And there are several ways that I could have gone about doing what I'm doing here. I could have done a bunch of different spray paint, or I could have done a dirty pour. In this particular case, I don't have spray paint colors in every single color that I wanted to use on here, and also I didn't want to use quite that much of my paint for a dirty pour. So I just used a sponge, a makeup sponge, and I sponged on colors in pink, blue, and purple, and I lightened them up significantly from even what they came out of the bottle. And just did a light sort of dusting of color over the entire surface, and I tried to keep it a little bit random so it had a kind of a watercolor-esque design to it. Just something pretty for a little girl, and I think she'll enjoy this. She's 4, so I think these kinds of colors and designs are just up her alley. So there's the purple, and that's the last color I'm adding to this. I wanted it to be very, very light, and I am putting glitter over this. So, but I still wanted it to be at least partially noticeable, and I think I actually did succeed at the end of this. So I did actually record myself adding the glue onto this, but I didn't really think it was all that riveting a watch, so I don't have it on here. But I used, I believe, E6000 spray-on glue, but I brushed it on. That being said, with this stuff, you have to apply a very, very thick layer in order to get any kind of tackiness on your surface. Since this cup, I've actually switched to like just a spray-on Loctite kind of glue instead, just because it's a fair bit more consistent when it comes to the tackiness and the overall effect that you're going to get, how much of the glitter is actually going to stick. So despite the glue's best effort, I did get a fairly even coverage of glitter onto the cup. And I did put a single layer of epoxy on it before I added my vinyl. And here I'm just, again, buffing the surface slightly because there were still some imperfections in the epoxy. And then I'm cleaning the surface real quick with a little bit of rubbing alcohol just to get all the extra dust off of there. So now we come to the fun part. And when I say fun, I mean it really wasn't. So I got this image off of Etsy from a seller on there, but you can obviously use most any one that you would like. So I started with the horns and the two side flowers, and I did those in a holographic vinyl that's a Cricut vinyl rather than the Oracle vinyl. And unfortunately here, I won't see the problem that this caused right this minute, but I'll see it a little bit later. And next I decided to intersperse the holographic with a foil gold. And thankfully there weren't too many issues with the gold, because sometimes that foil shows all of the problems in your epoxy. And then I used a pink vinyl from Oracle, smoothing out all of the bumps and lumps with it. And then I started adding two little flowers. These both also came from Oracle. And then I believe there are 651 vinyl from Oracle. And next are the ears. Get those on there. There's one and then two. And this is where I believe I started noticing that things were kind of not working. You'll sort of see me looking at it and contemplating my life and contemplating where I went wrong with everything, and making a decision that this was really uncool. So you may be able to see it in this video. I stopped there, and then I came back to it and I was like, well, let me try and make it work. Let me see if I can make it work. And so I did this. I finished it. I put Cammie's name on it, Camille, and used the same teal and then the holographic. But as you can see from here, you can see that the horn is a little bit tilted off to the side. Also, one of her ears was a little bit off as well. And in this particular video, you'll see that I start pointing that out. I don't remember if I was speaking into the camera or not, but I ended up recutting the entire horn and recutting the ears, and also I recut one of the flowers. I made it purple instead of that dark blue, but I removed the top 4 spirals of the horn, not the entire horn, but just the top 4 spirals, and then reposition them slightly so that they would point, I think, a bit straighter up. And there I am pointing that out, and so that it would be over a little bit. Also, I ended up taking off one of the ears, the ear on the right side. And again, I repositioned it a little bit. I had to use a kind of a razor blade to get that off, but it was worth it, and I think it turned out much better for it. And for Cammie's name, I used teal vinyl and then the holographic over it, which I may have already said. Pardon me if I did. And there is my epoxy, which I've already mixed, and I believe I only used 5 milliliters for this particular layer. And now we're going to, oops, oh, saved, thank God. So now we're going to get that ready to go. So we're going to start turning and start going. And as fascinating as I'm sure watching me apply epoxy is, maybe you guys can just pretend that you watch me finish applying this and then letting it dry, and then I sanded it in between and applied it again. And that's pretty much it for this little cup. I had to do some cleaning on the inside, and I don't think I've ever mentioned it in a video, but just in case anybody cares, the way I clean the inside of my cups is I use Goo Gone and a little bit of steel wool, and that pulls off all paint or extra glue that's in there. If there's a globule of epoxy, I will just take an X-Acto knife and just scrape that off, and it comes off no problem. So that's pretty much it, and here are the fashion shots. I really do love how they turned out. I think they're perfect for a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I think they'll both really, really like them. And, you know, I like the fact that they have kind of a matching, you know, sort of aesthetic going on, while at the same time being pretty different in terms of color and style. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this particular video. I'll be back next week, maybe the week after that, with another video, and that one will be a return to K-pop. So see you then. Bye-bye.